everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film the third episode of my TBR Takedown challenge video. This stack right here of 4 books is what's left of the 10 books that I started with that Doris picked out for me when she was here in July. These are the books that we looked through on my physical TBR and talked about, and she thought that I was least likely to get along with. And so the goal of this video and this video series is for me to read the books, choosing which ones to read using a spinner wheel, and then determining if I should continue on and read them in full or if I should just DNF them and let them go. So that's what we're going to do. Before we get started with the spinner, though, I have to show you my t-shirt that my daughter bought me for my birthday. So it is Ban Bigots, Not Books. So my local bookstore has a banned book room, and it's a secret room in the bookstore. So it's behind a hidden door, and you go in and there's shelves of books that have been banned over the course of time in the United States. And there's a little slip of paper in each one that explains when it was banned and why it was banned. And also in that room, they have various t-shirts, and this was one that really spoke to me. So my daughter kindly bought that one for me, and I wanted to share it with you. So let's get to the spinner wheel. Like I said, there are only 4 books left up here. So we are going to spin the wheel and see which one we're gonna read for this last video of the series. The Midcoast. Okay, very exciting. Let's grab that one. This is a book that's set in Maine. So I don't know if Adam White is from Maine himself, but this is a book that's set in Maine in the town of Damariscotta, which I am familiar with. And it is about somebody who is from this town, and he comes back home and witnesses something, and he doesn't really understand because it doesn't go along with what he knows about the family that he witnesses this particular episode. And so it seems like it's kind of a mystery, maybe. It also takes place, Damariscotta is a coastal Maine town, and you know I love a coastal Maine setting, but I have heard mixed reviews of this book, so that is why it made it onto this list of not really being sure if I was going to like it or not. So we're going to attempt this one, and I will come back and let you know how it's going to go. I am back after a extended break, only because I got involved in other reading projects, not because this book was bad. So I had been reading The Midcoast by Adam White. That was my first pick for this round of the TBR Takedown, and this was very good. I enjoyed my time with this book very much. It's not a perfect read, and I think maybe I was really invested in it in the beginning, and then maybe it got a little bit dragged out towards the end, I would say. Like maybe the pacing was a little bit not for me. So it's one of those mysteries where you get the crime right in the beginning. You don't know exactly what you know, but you're at the arrest stage right in the beginning of the book. And then the book goes way back to the beginning, and you learn all about the different characters involved and how they got to that initial scene that you read about. So you know the crime, but you don't know why or how it all happened. So that was very, those are interesting mysteries. They're maybe not my favorite type, but I did enjoy this one. I particularly love the setting. This place takes place in Damariscotta, Maine, which is a coastal town down in the Midcoast area of the state. It's about 3.5 hours from where I live if you drove down the coast. So you're following Andy. He's our main character, and he's telling the story of this family that he knows. Andy had moved to this town in Damariscotta, had gone to high school in the town, and then left for college and part of his young adulthood, and he'd gotten married and had children, and he and his wife and children have moved back to this small Maine town, and he is now the English teacher. And they get invited to a party of a couple that Andy had known when he was in high school, and they've done really well for themselves. They are now one of the movers and shakers in the community, quite wealthy. And they get invited to this sort of like big extravaganza party. And at the party, the cops show up. And you realize pretty quickly that something shady's been going on with this family. And Andy, because of his background, he wants to be a writer, starts to investigate this story and try to figure out what has happened to this family. And he's so curious to know because of his connection with them. And so part of this is him just being a nosy Nelly. And part of it is, him really wanting to write a good book based on the story. So yeah, it's an interesting framing of how we find out all of the ins and outs of the story. And there's a lot in here about growing up in a coastal fishing village that rang true to me, where people who maybe didn't have all the opportunities in life find little windows to create opportunities for themselves, and why they might choose to do that. That rang true to me. So a lot of these characters in this book I recognized. So interesting story, and it just, the pacing I think for me was not 100% always on. So I kind of get why now looking back on it, I saw mixed reviews of this story. But overall, I found this to be an enjoyable read. This would be a great vacation or a beach read, I think, type of a book. So that was another book off this stack of 10 books. We only have 3 left to go. Here they are right here. I've got my little spinner wheel. Let's pick the next one. We'll spin this wheel and see what my next read's gonna be. Let's see, what do we got? The Eye in the Door. Okay, historical fiction based on World War I. So this is book 2 in the Regeneration trilogy by Pat Barker. I read Regeneration quite a long time ago. I remember like the basic gist of it, but I don't remember the entire story. This is about 280 pages, so I'm gonna give this one a whirl and we'll see how it goes. Okay, I'm back with my report on The Eye in the Door by Pat Barker, which is book 2 in the Regeneration trilogy. I did read book 1, Regeneration, but it was many years ago. And I sadly am DNFing this book. And I don't necessarily think that it is the book's fault. So here's my 2 issues with it. This is historical fiction, takes place during World War I, following a group of men who had been impacted by the war. The first book followed those men as they were in like a hospital of some kind, being treated for their various mental issues from the war. And the second book opens up with one of the characters from the first book, and I don't remember his name, Billy maybe? Yeah, Billy Pryor. And I believe I remember him from the first book, and so we follow him, and the first chapter is quite striking. There's some things that happen in that first chapter that really grab your attention. But what I would say is the overall tone is very dark, which is not working for me right now in my own mental state. Dark historical fiction is really not the vibe. And the second problem that I have with this is the book keeps mentioning all these people and I don't know who they're talking about. And I'm pretty sure they're referencing characters from book 1, and it's been so long since I read book 1 that I don't remember who they are, and I am not willing to go back and reread book 1 at this point. So I'm going to let this one go, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to DNF, pull it off my physical TBR, and I'm just going to shelf it next to Regeneration, and then if some point in the future I want to reread Regeneration and go on to book 2, it will be there for me. But at this point, I am just not interested in this story. I'm not interested in figuring out what's going on. I'm putting the work in to figure out what's going on, and I really am not interested in sort of dark historical fiction at the moment. So I read the first 3 chapters of this, so I read this much of it, and I just can't do it because it's been several days and I cannot make myself pick this up and read it. So it's just not going to happen. So that means we have only 2 books left in our stack of 10 that we started out with for this project, this TBR Takedown project. So we're going to do one more spin, and that's going to be the final spin, and it's going to tell me the order in which I'm going to try these 2 books. So got my handy, sorry the light wants to shine in that, but it's very dark out and cloudy today. But we'll let this bad boy spin and tell us which book we are going to start with here. And it's going to be the Rumi Prescription. So this is a nonfiction. It's been a while since we've had a nonfiction in this project. So I'm going to try this one. It's a memoir. It is the subtitle is How an Ancient Mystic Poet Changed My Modern Manic Life. So I don't know. I don't know about that one. I will say I really like this bird on the cover, though. That's pretty cool. And then that means the last book that I'm going to read for this project is Quick Shot by Salman Rushdie. And Salman Rushdie, I have enjoyed his nonfiction. I've read one other fiction book by him, which was okay. And I believe this is a retelling of Don Quixote. So who knows? But first, we're going to start with the Rumi Prescription. We're going to see how this one goes, and I will come back to you and let you know how I get on with it. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here today to film the final episode of my TBR Takedown challenge, in which I was trying to read through 10 books that Doris picked out off my physical TBR shelves back in July, and I was using a spinner wheel to decide the order in which I would read them, and I have now completed the 9th and 10th books. If you remember, the 2 books that I had left to read were the Rumi Prescription and Keyshot, which that was the order that the spinning wheel told me I was going to read them in. The 2 books that I read previous, so the final 4 books in this round, were Eye in the Door, and the Midcoast. So 3 fiction, 1 nonfiction. So this time I'm going to be reviewing the last 2 books I read, the Rumi Prescription and then Keyshot. So first of all, the Rumi Prescription, which is How an Ancient Mystic Poet Changed My Modern Manic Life by Melody Mosey. And this is nonfiction memoir. And I went into this very skeptical that I would enjoy this because it's about sort of spiritual in nature, about poetry and things like that. And those are not things that I particularly gravitate towards in my reading life. But this was a very pleasant surprise. So first of all, I did not understand that the author is Iranian American. And so a lot of this book is about her experiences growing up in an immigrant family. She was born in the United States. Her parents had immigrated to the United States previously. And after she was born, they moved back to Iran. And so she lived there for a while when she was a very young child, and very strong connection to her past and her ancestry because her father was very much into this poet Rumi, who is a poet from ancient times in the area that we now know as the Middle East, Persia. And so he, throughout her life, would quote poetry to her, would use poetry as illustrations for different things that were happening in their lives. And so she, as an adult, after struggling with mental health issues and other, things that were real roadblocks to her, progression in life, she decided to take some time and learn how to translate this poetry by having her father teach her Persian, ancient Persian, and using this poetry as the method that they would go through this. And so this book is all about that process, but in the meantime, it's also her relating pieces of her life, her experiences with mental illness, her experiences trying to become an author, her experiences as a second-generation immigrant in the United States. Just really excellent. The parts about the immigrant experience I really felt were the strongest parts of the book, but I also enjoyed her family interactions. Like, this is a very close and loving family. Her issues in her adult life do not stem from dysfunction in her own family. This is a family that's very close and loving, and it was just a joy to read about such a lovely family. And I learned a lot about Rumi as well, who I did not know anything about before picking up this book. So if you are more into that sort of spiritual side, I will say that there were times when this book got a little too off into that aspect of the discussion from my own preferences. But if that's something that you enjoy, if you like memoirs about people's experiences with mental illness and how they deal with that in terms of designing a life that in which they can thrive, if you like family stories, immigrant stories, I think that this is a great pick for you. So yeah, pleasant surprise. Really glad that this project encouraged me to pick this book up. And I don't know if I, when or if I ever would have gotten to this one. And so I'm very pleased to have read this one. And then the last book in this project was Keyshot by Salman Rushdie. So this is a modern retelling in the style of Don Quixote, following a man who is Indian American. He is elderly, he's in the older years of his life. He is basically on a quest to connect with his true love, and his true love is a reality TV star, and it's very quirky, written with. I've only read one other of Salman Rushdie's fiction works. I've read a couple of his nonfiction pieces. I prefer his nonfiction to his fiction. He writes with a lot of satire and magical realism. I like the satire part. I'm not so thrilled with the magical realism aspects of his writing. He weaves in tons of pop culture references. Salman Rushdie is, he's talking about a lot of cultural and political issues in his storytelling. And this book is no different. This was published in 2019. So a lot of this is riffing on American politics in the first term of Donald Trump's presidency. And there's some really funny bits, but then towards the end of the book, for me, it really gets off the rails in terms of the magical realism. So this man, what is his name? Sam Duchamp. Okay, so there's two storylines. I should mention this. This is a dual storyline story. And it got quite confusing because by the end, everything is overlapping and interweaving, and you're like, okay, who's what and who's doing what? So Sam Duchamp is a author, and he has created this character of Keyshot, who is the older Indian American man who is traveling across the country to find his true love, who is a reality TV star. And on the way, as this author is telling the story of Keyshot imagines into life a son. He doesn't have a son in reality, but he imagines into life this son, Sancho. And so Keyshot and Sancho are traveling across the country to try to connect with his true love. And while we're having that story being told, the experiences of this Indian American man and his son as they're traveling across the American landscape in current political conditions, this author is also telling his backstory of his family. He is basically writing himself, right? He is Indian American. He has a lot of the same issues that his character has. And so much so that you, as the reader, I got confused many times over whether we were talking about the fictional people or, as far as the fictional people in terms of what the author was writing, or we were talking about the author's family, because of the overlap and because the author is basically writing his own story in this satire and this reimagining of Don Quixote. So, it goes off the rails a bit. I think it gets a little bit out there and a little bit towards the end, I was just like, okay, I've had enough of this. So this one was not fully successful for me. I am glad I read it. I'm glad I've gotten it off my shelves. I think Salman Rushdie is just a tremendous writer, obviously. You don't need me to tell you that, but I'm not sure that his storytelling style is 100% for me. Although I do really like his satire and his humor and his cultural references, and the points that he's trying to make are all things that I find quite interesting. But then it just the story itself just is too much. There's too many elements. So yeah, it gets a little bit crazy and weird. So that's my last book for this project, and I will say, just overall, this has been a fantastic project. I really enjoyed the process of working through this stack of 10 books. I think it was really successful in that these are books that I don't know when I ever would have gotten to them. So it was awesome to clear them off the shelves, A, but B, I found some really excellent books that were just languishing. And, you know, God only knows when I would have gotten to them. So it really encouraged me to pick things up that I wasn't naturally gravitating towards, and I had some very big wins from that process. I also just really enjoyed the surprise of using a spinner wheel to pick my next read. So I think I will incorporate that into an upcoming project. I have some ideas that I want to toss around in my mind a little bit longer. They're not fully solidified yet, but I think that you will see a return of the spinner wheel picks my read in the future. So if that's something that you enjoyed in this series of videos, then stay tuned, because I think it will be making a reappearance. Anyway, I had a lot of fun doing this project. I hope that you had fun watching the videos that came out of it, and I hope you're all doing well and finding some great books to read. I'll talk to you later.